Thank you. And in order for us to meet our time frame, I will speak, and then Ross will join in our Q&A at the end. What I'm going to talk about today is actually quite focused in terms of the project types that we'll be looking at. I'm showing this as a kind of pretext to what I'm going to talk about, and that it's really, I'll be talking about variants today. Variants on the barn building typology. We'll look specifically at, specifically at the Louisville region. This is actually an aerial of Louisville. This is the Ohio River that wraps around the city. And we'll be looking at different projects located in proximity to this river valley condition. What I'll be talking about today is really, again, our explorations on the barn and how that sort of transforms in relation to specific programmatic criteria, client needs, and kind of explorations and just making. I'm going to preface all of this, though, with a kind of background in which all this production really occurs. This is a shot of our office. Specifically, in this view, we all work at one long 80-foot long table. And we really don't have fixed spots. We sort of move in relation to piles of project material. And so we really do truly collaborate, and we really encourage eavesdropping. Sometimes it causes a lot of tension in the office, but in the end, we believe critique and a healthy debate is always good. And this is just another shot in our previous office. We also tend to work on site. In this case, we actually moved the whole office to Nantucket to spend a week on looking at a series of pavilions for a waterfront project. We also do not work autonomously. We always work this is very typical of how we work, a charrette process with all of the, not just the clients, but community members, really a lot of different people involved. And a key part of this is really to make sure that we build a consensus building kind of format for our design work. And also, it helps us to prioritize really what is most important. These are what we glean from listening to all these conversations is really a much more in-depth, sort of nuanced understanding of what the project needs to be. We also work collaboratively with other architects. In this case, we're actually working with 4 other architects nationwide on a new high adventure base camp in West Virginia. So we actually set up camp in West Virginia for 2 weeks. We also work a lot through conceptual precedents as a way to guide our work and to focus how we might articulate the program, materials, and construction techniques. This is a series of images that help to shape our thinking about what a central staircase for the Filson Historical Society project might be. And then we like to build full-scale mock-ups. In this case, a client had come to us asking for an observation tower for a myelin land sculpture. In the end, we convinced him that really something that was more akin to an implement was probably more appropriate. And so this is a full-scale mock-up. This is the client. We convinced him that it's not scary to climb up the ladder. We also, in this instance, realized that something of this magnitude or smaller scale of a viewing ladder had to be transportable and able to be set up by 2 people. So we were looking at how heavy is something like a mirror-polished stainless steel tripod. And then we also work collaboratively with fabricators, in this case, furniture makers, to shape opportunities to really take advantage of these kinds of materials. So this is the final product of this kind of viewing implement, and the fact that it could be moved around the property in relation to the seasons, and they sort of treat it like an annual barn raising. So that is kind of the context that all of these works that I'm going to talk about today really take shape. I'm going to go through this project quickly. This was our most recent project we completed with them, which is again using an existing barn on the property, a tobacco barn. and then transforming that into a new visitor center for them. This one had a specific set of its own criteria. We had to literally design and build this barn in a 4-month period. There was only $100,000 to deal with by a private donor, and we had to open this up in time for the garden season. And so this is the existing tobacco barn. And of course, there was qualities about this that we were really drawn to, similar to the hay barn. And so in this case here, this is the structure. What we did is we really took advantage of the fact that the existing entryway into the gardens actually went through the barn. And so that was really kind of our way to, again, expand a kind of logic about what we could do with the program. So this is a floor plan, existing tobacco barn, new tobacco barn. What we literally did is insert a structure completely independently of the tobacco barn. That way we're using the outer shell of the tobacco barn as a kind of shading structure, but we were also able to build this fairly quickly, again using a kind of very simple kit of parts, but using the outer shell really to give the kind of defining characteristic of the barn interior. So literally from the exterior, the barn looks pretty much untouched. It's really the interior that has been changed. Section here, before, after, again, the structure is completely independent of the tobacco barn. And this really helped facilitate us being able to construct this in a very timely manner. So this is the kit of parts, the existing tobacco barn, inserting a new gift shop inside. So this is the view from the garden looking back out towards the parking structure. Essentially, it looks pretty much unchanged. There is the gift shop protrudes a little bit into the opening, so from the gardens it becomes a kind of display vitrine. But also in the daytime, it becomes a reflective element that actually completes this kind of iconic interior view of the barn. So the slats actually, what had been so beautiful to us in the original structure is still maintained. The area to the right of this is actually does multi-purpose or functions in a host of different uses. Sometimes they have plant sales here. This is where groups meet. We're able to take advantage of the areas immediately outside on either end of the bank barn for different uses. And so the frontal view here then is this inserted sort of glass box with the original barn slatting beyond. I'll just go through quickly some details here. Again, the kind of layering of gift shop elements to the barn skin, playing with light, both translucent and clear glass. You can see here, really, we again exaggerating this kind of separation between new and old. And then the kinds of minute details that we're really careful about, how the existing tree trunks protrude through the concrete slab. View at night. And then this is a view of the tobacco barn at night, how we sort of invert that quality of the barn, of the light filtering through the barn. In the evening, it becomes the lantern itself within the landscape. So that was really a kind of a series of projects we started at Dell. At the same time that was happening, we actually relocated our office. We actually started our office in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we actually relocated to Louisville. And at that time, we had been looking at new office space. And we had an opportunity here to build at the edge of downtown. This is actually in a quite diverse, very sort of incongruous context here. There's the site is here. It was a vacant site. There was a historic firehouse, a series of shotgun homes, some storefronts on this end, and all of this fronting a service tank welding facility. So it could not be any more incongruous in terms of our context. And so this is really what the new building is. We also had this kind of constraint, which is we had $200,000 loan from the bank. We knew we had to build an office. We needed a conference area. We needed storage. We needed a wood shop because that's how we tend to work. We needed an intern apartment suite, and I can go about that in detail, maybe in the Q&A. There were 2 condominiums and a garden courtyard. So this is really kind of our challenge of how do we do all that, build in the heart of the city for this amount of money. We knew that this kind of construction logic would be in our price range, so the metal-clad pole barn. And we also knew that there was these are our builders. We also know that in terms of a pole barn builder, we didn't really have the kind of skill sets that we would normally come to expect in terms of the kind of level of craft and precision. So this really determined how we might go about manipulating this kind of kit of parts. So this is really the kind of logic of the pole barn. Poles, columns, wood columns at 12 feet on center, and then floor joists. And then we realized that simply by shifting these joists up and down, not playing with the span, we could actually play with the same kit of parts, and so end up with this kind of section. So even within the simple volume of the metal shed, we could actually get away with quite a series of volumetric spaces within. And so this is the floor plan, and we began to look at inflections on the street side to engage the sidewalk. And this is kind of an X-ray view of the barn then. Within this simple pole barn shape, we are actually able to squeeze all of these programmatic elements within. So this is just some constructional views. You can see here the shifting of the floor plates up. You can see here downtown Louisville beyond. Again, this is really straightforward construction, shifting of floor plates, and then the completed building. Again, in this instance, we were really concerned with how we might engage the street, looking at ideas like sort of urban furniture, a bench, inflections to the building skin, a kind of interpretation of the storefront, and then something that might relate more towards the kind of civic scale of the city with giant shutters here. And so this is the project here in relation to the historic firehouse. I should note here that the original building site did have a barn. Originally, it actually held the stables for the horses for the firehouse. So there was a kind of historical precedent for us in terms of what had originally been on that site. And so this is the barn in the evening. Now this part of the neighborhood is really has become quite lively. There's a lot of galleries and shops, and there's a kind of tradition of Friday night gallery crawls. So we sort of partake in that by using their storefront as a projection element. In Derby season, we actually project vintage Derby races. There was also we're drawn to the kimono and the kind of flower patterns in terms of how that might, this might be kind of washed out here, how that might shape what the interior of our office space might be. So I'm hoping you can see this so this really plays into our kind of logic here of using really conventional off-the-shelf materials. In this case, our interior lights are just really simple porcelain sockets with fluorescent, round fluorescent tubes, spread out in random patterns within these upper baffles so that we actually get very even diffuse light interior. Usually we don't always turn these lights on because we actually have pretty good natural light coming in from both ends of the building. There's also this kind of treatment to the wall, this kind of play of white on white in gloss and matte finishes that actually begins to enliven our walls here, depending on the time of day. So there's a very, literally our walls shift in terms of coloration and how exaggerated or not the patterns might become. This is also very, again, this is kind of a nod to the barn, the lights, natural light filtering through barn plank siding. The monumental shutters, we actually built that in-house. It was kind of a riff on split rail stacked fences in the region, common to the region. So it's really just 2x2 lumber fastened to a steel frame. This is Dave in our office building the modules. So this is getting ready to install. And so it's really that simple in a way. Again, straightforward, common materials. The side garden then is the entry to the residential areas of the building. So there is a central stairway here that also functions as a kind of draft space that pulls warm air up through this core and actually pulls cooling breezes throughout throughout most of the spring and fall seasons. When it gets too hot in the summertime, it gets pretty muggy in Louisville. Then that's when we use air conditioning. So these are just views of the interior spaces of the condominiums. Again, lots of natural light, very simple spaces. That is a real rabbit. It's actually a rescued rabbit that was found in a local park. We knew it wasn't a wild rabbit, and it was probably in imminent danger, so it's become an office pet. And so I'll go now to Mason Lane Farm, which is a farm operations. It's operations and maintenance facility. The same time we were building our building, a client had come to us to see what we might do with, again, very simple kit of parts, but also consolidate all of the kind of farm needs on this farm, which is about 2,000 acres. And it's used for a range of activities. Certainly there's crops on a rotational basis, but it's also used for equestrian activities. It's an astronomical observation site for the University of Louisville. And then also there's a kind of a master plan here in terms of conservation easements and how this might be developed in not only a green sustainable but also a fiscally sustainable model. So the project site is here. It's at the heart of the property, but also using existing infrastructure. This is the main road through the farm property. Just views of the existing farm. This is actually the project site. It had always been the intention that this would ultimately be screened from the public. There was an existing gravel lot here that they had used to just store farm equipment out of doors. So there was a lot of advantage in terms of using this spot specifically. The program is actually quite simple. It's to both store farm equipment and square-baled hay, and also to repair farm equipment. This, again, was our kind of precedent. What can we do with the kit of parts? There was also a budget here that was quite tight. But also we wanted to test, this is really encouraged by our client, how far we could really push kind of sustainable strategies here. But we really wanted to kind of interpret that in a way that did not rely on sort of specialized systems, sort of marketed products. We were more interested in the kind of example of vernacular buildings, that there was a kind of nuanced specificity to these kinds of buildings in relation to the landscape, and that they in fact come to define the region. So, for example, the tobacco barns. And there was something that we really were trying to avoid here in terms of the kind of sameness, in terms of implementing these strategies like photovoltaic panels, the sod roof, geothermal heating, gray water reuse. Certainly all of those things we had looked at, but we were really interested in something more simple. This was also a test for us in terms of going through the LEED certification process and just to see what we could really, what kind of level we could really achieve by using the simplest of systems. So we were looking at these kinds of precedents, again, tobacco drying. There's a kind of logic for this and why it's specific to our region. There was also a kind of material palette then that came to be developed simply by the items that were being stored here. The square-baled hay that is at first green and it ultimately turns into a kind of golden element. the kind of scale of grass, and then certainly bamboo. In our case, we were looking at Kentucky cane, which is actually an invasive weed in our area. And so we had been looking at a palette of materials that, I should say that really this project was about choosing wisely. In other words, what were the materials that were locally available to us? Most of the materials for this project were within a 100-mile radius of the site. So we had been looking, though, at bamboo. I'll go into the bamboo aspect in a little bit, but we had been looking at Kentucky cane initially, but also looking at materials like hemp, formaldehyde-free particle board, linoleum. What are all these kinds of materials that are just so easy, not only easy to get, but also easy to repair or replace as needed? So this is the site plan. It's essentially two barn structures, an enclosed barn and then a covered barn. This is barn A, barn B. And then a silo that is erected depending on the seasons. There's sometimes two silos here. But you can see here that most of this area is really geared for farm circulation. So it's all gravel surface, so it's all pervious. All of these circulation elements, all the two barn structures are meant for drive-through circulation of all the farm vehicles. And then the kind of integration of building and site, the way that roof, the pitching of the gravel surface, and how all of that is really geared or focused towards rain gardens here at the lower elevations, and then feeding back to local aquifers. There's also a radiant slab heating here that's fed by a wood-fired boiler fueled by farm debris. And then a pretty straightforward septic system. There was also a kind of palette of plant material that was native or regionally adapted. We utilized a local nursery, actually 10 miles from the site, to supply all of the seeding for this. So this is the project. Again, two barns, an enclosed barn, and then a covered, really over shed for drive-through farm equipment. In the foreground here, this is really just at the completion of construction. So what would normally be vegetated plant matter here is still gaining root. So all of the plant material here requires no irrigation. So these are the two structures, and I'll just go through these slides very quickly. This is barn A. Barn A is basically a covered shed. There's a farm manager's office, an insulated work area, and tool storage. Again, using the very straightforward kit of parts, but then using very common or very simple techniques like through circulation, natural light, and then using a very reductive process in terms of how we implemented the materials. So in this case, if we didn't need it, we wouldn't apply it. And wherever we used a material, every piece and part counted. So what would normally be considered a finished material, we ended up using substrate material as in fact, finished materials. So here is a kind of palette of particle board, homosote panels, and then OSB using the guidelines that normally comes with this as the kind of finish patterning. I'll just go through these quickly. This is the farm manager's office. Here we used homosote and the cross cut, so it becomes a pinup board for them. Again, the use of natural light through operable windows. So again, and here, I'm just going to flip through these quickly. Again, a kind of logic for layering. Here, every screw pattern we accounted for. So it was actually very easy to price this building. We literally knew how many screws we were using. The layering of materials, again. Here we used oriented strand board and the grid pattern that's normally on that as the finished material. This also then became a kind of our inspiration for the bamboo barn B. Everyone really got into this. Even all the plumbers, everyone really became really careful about how they actually laid systems, even on the walls. It really became a kind of source of pride for all the people building this project. Barn B then was on either end is where they store square-baled hay. So this may become porous or not porous depending on the volume of hay that's here. But the bamboo lattice was important because it was meant to be a rain shield, but also we needed to have ventilation flow through so that all of this hay dries. So this is a view from in the meadow. In the case of Barn B, there are two drainage channels that function as counterweights. You can see on this blue line below grade, because this is essentially an open-air roof structure. There's actually, the uplift was quite great. So the drainage channels also does double duty as counterweights. And you can see the channels here on each side. There are no gutters here, again, because this is a maintenance shed. We tried to reduce maintenance for the facility itself. So wherever we could eliminate these kinds of pieces that had to be maintained, we did it. The bamboo, this was kind of an interesting choice for us because we really had looked at different materials at first. We had originally looked at cedar, but the bamboo was actually available only 35 miles away. There was a resiliency to it. In other words, the nodes, they're fused. So even though the bamboo might crack over time or crack caused by farm equipment bumping into it, there was a kind of resiliency in the material itself. So this was, and so the installation was quite simple. A person took an awl using a galvanized wire tie and just twisted it. And so this is the barn in construction. It was originally green, but you can see here, just like the hay, it actually turned gold, golden color. And the wire tie then becomes a kind of smaller detail at the kind of human level, which allows them to kind of adjust the barn skin over time. And I'll go through this quickly, but this is really, again, simple kit of parts, simple sustainable strategies. And this is as high-tech as we get, which is the wood-fired boiler fed by farm debris. And really using no geothermal heating, no solar panels, no sod roof, all of the kind of usual suspects of green systems. We actually got a LEED silver rating for this.